Hello and welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. My name's Sylvie, and today we're going to be unpacking a bit of the science behind your words. So, the things that you say out loud, and the idea that the words that you say can be your wand in the sense that you can create magic with them, you can create what you desire, you can kind of attract or bring forward or build what you want by the words you say. And the opposite, which, your words can be your sword, is in the sense that they cut you, they hurt you, they kind of break you down, and they get you further away from what you want and what you desire. And I, in particular, and I'll share some stories, have found it quite confusing how to use our words to our benefit. So I say this almost every episode, but the concept that cells fire together, wire together, plays in with this really well, but it's not as easy as it just being like a one-to-one relationship. So if you haven't heard me say this before, cells that fire together, wire together is the scientific concept that when a set of neurons fire together, so if you have a circuit that fires, when you give it high frequency stimulation, so when it fires many times over and over again, especially in a relatively short period, it'll find ways to become more efficient at firing. So you don't need as much stimulation in order for it to fire. And I always use learning how to ride your bike as an example, where you learn how you ride your bike as a kid. It takes you 2 weeks to be able to not fall off your bike, and then you don't touch your bike for 10 years and your friends want to go for a picnic and a bike ride, you hop on your bike, you might be a bit wobbly, but you're able to ride it fine. That's because that circuit is extremely well wired. You don't need that same level of stimulation, that like 2 weeks as a kid, to be able to hop on your bike. So how does this work when it comes to your words? There's a lot of, stuff floating around affirmations, if affirmations work, if they don't work. And affirmations are statements of things you either want to feel, want to embody, or want to have. So things like, I am confident, I am beautiful, I am smart, or another one is like, I am a millionaire, I'm a successful business owner, I am a doctor, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of kind of mixed views about whether this actually helps you get closer to that or not. And we'll unpack that in a little bit. And then there's also the kind of inverse, right? So when we say things that are not so positive, and this is not to be like toxic positivity, I promise I'll unpack both. But the idea that, if you have stress in your life, like if you're going through a particularly stressful time, which honestly probably a lot of us are, the idea of sharing it with someone, you can kind of relieve that burden, right? And not have it live in your brain and replay so often. But that also has a lot of kind of nuance that people miss. When you don't have the nuance for either, they can end up being, harmful for your brain. They can end up reinforcing things that you don't have the intention to reinforce. So I'm going to share stories of both because I've done both. I've used both. The specific nuance and this kind of third way that I've found that is a mixture that seems to work quite well when it comes to building the circuits we want to build, because that's ultimately what we're using our words for. We're using our words for stimulation to build the circuits we want. So the first one I'll start with is affirmations, and my kind of not even beef with affirmations, but the nuance that people often miss. And so I got introduced to affirmations when I was 18. If you don't know my story, um, I'll share a little bit with you now. But basically, when I was young, like when I was 16, 17, 18, I struggled quite a bit with my mental health, in particular with depression, kind of suicidal ideation, and drinking as well, which of course kind of all plays in together. But basically I was going, you know, to psychiatrists, trying to get on the right medications. And if anybody's been on that journey, it's a guessing game, basically, right? Of which medication you'll do the best with. And you often get a lot of side effects, and it's a bit of a struggle. And so through that struggle, I actually ended up in an outpatient program in Ottawa at it wasn't the Royal Ottawa, which is the mental health hospital in Ottawa. I think it's the General. And I mean, this was over a decade ago. So who knows what the program is like now. But it was basically 1 week or 2 week, maybe even a 3 week program. I'm really, yeah, don't remember a ton about that time. But it's a mixture of like seeing social workers, seeing psychiatrists, and then learning skills kind of the second half of your day, right? Like eating, exercise. And one of the skills we learned was affirmations to help with our negative thinking, our kind of ruminating thoughts, and our limiting beliefs. And when we learned it, it was like, well, you focus on the things that you want, right? Which is basically the opposite of what you have. So, for example, a big part of depression is feeling worthless, and suicidal ideation is feeling worthless and not wanting to be around anymore, and basically not wanting to be around partially because you think the world would be better off, right? It's quite, if anybody's been there, they can understand how dark of a place that is. So when I heard of these affirmations, I was like, okay, great. Well, I can definitely do this. So I wrote down all the things that I wanted, right? Which is, I feel worthy, I feel confident, I feel happy, all these things. And I was incredibly, sorry guys, also it's like thinking the mic is a toy. Um, and I was thinking, like, this is great because, I can put these on my fridge. I can put this on the mirror. And I was still living with my parents, of course. I was finishing high school, but I had my own bathroom. And then I put it as reminders on my phone. And I got really creative of reminding me every time, every time, every time, every time I could. And I was like, you know what? This doesn't work for people because they're not diligent. They just don't do it every day. But I am diligent. I'm also a bit stubborn. One of the same, right? And I did it every day. I was incredibly consistent, and it did not move the needle at all. And it's something that I've revisited on different phases of, rewiring my brain. And I finally figured out why it didn't work. Because in my mind, based off of what we know with cells that fire together, wire together, where, well, if I say, you know, the same thing to myself and read it, you know, every day or multiple times a day for weeks on end, months on end, years on end, then of course I'm going to build that circuit that recognizes that as my own. But that is the problem. If you don't believe it at all, if you don't have any kind of positive emotional reaction, especially in your body, like if you look at it and there's nothing in your brain that recognizes it as your own already, your brain's basically going to reject it. And if anything, it actually makes it worse. And I found to myself, as I was like saying things like, I'm worthy, I'm lovable, all these kinds of things, I literally had a little voice that was like, yeah, right. And that's what I was reinforcing, unfortunately, was how far away I was from feeling those affirmations. And so when it comes to affirmations, it's such a tricky dance because, yes, you want to stimulate those things, you want to build those things. I think that's incredible and that's great that you've identified them. But you have to build it in a way that is believable, that your brain is not automatically not going to recognize and reject. And I'll come back to that in a second, but that's the main reason why the way that affirmations are taught today don't work. And it doesn't mean that we don't use them all together, but we just have to get a little more creative in how we use them. And so the flip side of this, of using your words instead of building something like affirmations, is to offload something. right? So kind of venting, being able to share your stress with others, unpacking things, that kind of thing. And I'll use a more recent example for this one, which was doing my candidacy exam 3 years ago. So if you also don't know, I'm in the process of finishing my PhD in neuroscience. And one of the steps to do that kind of early in your degree is to do a candidacy exam, which is where you present your thesis proposal. You get quizzed, for lack of a better word, or grilled or roasted, however, however you feel about getting questions, but you get a lot of questions as well around basic knowledge in the field that you're studying. And so it's kind of a way of being like, okay, we'll let you continue because we think you will be successful in completing your doctorate, or they'll get you to try again, or they won't let you continue if they fear that you won't be able to successfully complete it. And so, needless to say, this is a stressful time often in grad school and a PhD's career when you're writing your thesis proposal and then doing your candidacy exam. And at that time, I was incredibly stressed. And a way that I dealt with it was sharing it with my friends, which again, when you kind of look at it at the surface level, you're like, that's good. Like you're staying connected. That's good. Like you don't want to be isolated when you're stressed. And like you're offloading your brain with things. That's great. Now, some of my friends, and in particular the one I shared it with the most, was a PhD student as well. I had already gone through it. So she had great insight, of course. And she was kind of saying, it's a stressful time. You just kind of have to like get through it. And what I found, and I wonder if you guys share this as well, during that stressful time, the more that I shared that I was stressed, candidacy exam related, blah, 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 the more I wanted to share it. And the more I kept sharing it. And the more I kept sharing it, the more it kind of naturally kept coming up in conversations, even when I didn't mean it to. And this is the part that's tricky because you're not offloading it anymore. And your brain is basically reinforcing and making that circuit stronger around that stressful event. So it's literally doing the opposite of what you're hoping that it'll do. And I remember as I was doing this and as it was happening and I was watching it and I was like, yes, this is a stressful time. But I don't love the answer of it's a stressful time and you just kind of have to deal. Like that there's no way that you can have a good time or a restful time or experience any type of peace in the like 3 months leading up to your candidacy exam. I was like, that just doesn't seem right. And what we know about the brain, we can definitely figure out a way for that not to be the case. But that's where, speaking things out loud to people, which I'll talk to as well, also has a bit of a delicate dance. And it's not me saying that, to not be vulnerable to your loved ones. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is being incredibly choosy about who you say things to and when you say something to someone as a way to reinforce what you want in your brain, not as a way to be perfect and not as a way to not be vulnerable. And also being choosy with the people that you share this to, right? Because you want to share it with people that are going to be in your corner and support you, but also recognizing that you have a lot of resources within yourself too. So, we talked a little bit about how like offloading your stress can actually perpetuate your stress and start building a circuit that is literally the opposite of your intention. And how affirmations, while you're trying to build new circuits, is actually reinforcing how you already feel, which is also the opposite of what you want with affirmations. What are we actually left with as a solution for our words? It is to find a statement that is believable. So, still sticking with, so there's two actually. There's finding a statement that's believable. So, let's say you're in a very stressful place, and using the affirmation, I'm happy, is just reinforcing the fact that you're unhappy and stressed. Finding a believable affirmation that does provide a bit of relief in your body, but doesn't feel like a flat out lie. So that can be things like, um, I'm capable of handling difficult situations, right? And if you kind of look at your past and you've seen all the times that you have been able to handle difficult situations and move through it, that might bring a bit of lightness to you. And kind of, you can tell because your chest kind of opens up a little bit, your shoulders maybe drop. You kind of have a little bit of a sigh of relief feel. It might not make you feel all the way great, which I think is also a bit of a misconception. It's very, the brain and the body doesn't work that way. If you're in total despair, to all of a sudden feel complete elation and joy, you kind of shift through it step by step of kind of going from despair, maybe to a bit of agitation, maybe a bit bored, maybe a bit comfortable, then a bit, you know what I mean? Like it's a scale. There's no like, switch to flip it all the way off and all the way on. So finding a statement that's believable, that provides a bit of relief, can be quite helpful. And then as you shift through the emotions, you can make that statement more and more grandiose, or more and more closer to what it is that you desire. Another one that is my absolute favorite, but it's not for everyone, because I know sometimes hearing doing something every day can overwhelm people, which I can appreciate. But when it comes to the brain, doing small things every day go a long way. And I think people forget it's the word small. And this is a small one. So hopefully you guys grab onto it, because since I've been doing this, I've been seeing a lot of changes in terms of how I think, in terms of how I approach situations, but also changes in my physical life. How people treat me, the opportunities that I'm getting, how people basically assume how I am or perceive me. So this one is focusing, whether again you're coming from the negative side of wanting to offload something, or the positive side of wanting to build something. Ultimately, we want to do those things because we want to feel a certain way. And so, for example, when it came to my candidacy exam, a big part of my stress is I felt like I was never doing enough for it. I was working, and not true, but it's how I felt, right? Which is important here, how you're feeling, was that I wasn't doing enough to ensure that I would be successful. And so my stress was feeling like I wasn't doing enough. Now, what I can do is basically have a sentence, right, or a statement that I'm trying to prove, that I'm trying to gather evidence to prove. So the statement would be, knowing that I'm doing more than enough to ensure my success, and I could make it specific to my candidacy exam. But honestly, knowing me, I can also make it kind of vague, because it's a common theme I have of where I feel like I'm not doing enough actions towards something. And what's great with common themes is that if you find one statement that shows up in many different areas of your life, you're basically getting a 2-for-1, 3-for-1, 4-for-1 deal. So the statement is knowing that I'm doing enough. And then the evidence is looking every single day. And you can start from the past as well, kind of pulling evidence from your past of small ways in which the actions that I have already done are more than enough to ensure my success, whatever that looks like for you. And that can be things, small things like feeding your cat, making your lunch, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, putting on a nice outfit so that you're presentable and feel confident in all the things you're doing. Looking at your past actions or the things that you have already done, right? Whether that's, degrees, doing like a good job, executing projects, and even getting a bit more personal, right? Like the actions that you do for your friends, your partner, your family, your loved ones. Even just the action of showing up and being yourself is more than enough to ensure your success. And you add to this list, whether it's a journal or notes app on your phone, every single day, finding at least one piece of evidence, and that is that high frequency stimulation that we talked about in the beginning. And because you're pulling from your own evidence, it is believable. And so you kind of, are able to get a lot accomplished in one small activity that works incredibly well for your brain in building a new circuit. What's cool about this as well is it also means there's nothing more you need to accomplish or buy or complete or any kind of conditions on yourself. There's no conditions you need to put on yourself to start building this circuit in your brain today, which is a trap that a lot of us get into. I know that I certainly have, and I continue to catch myself when this happens, placing conditions on feeling a certain way. That's partially society placing conditions on us to feel a certain way, partially how we're conditioned. It's also partially how the brain works. Like once you place a condition, it's not going to allow yourself to feel the way you want to feel until that condition's fulfilled. So for example, with my candidacy exam, that I can't feel relaxed or even healthy or happy until my candidacy exam is over, then my brain is not going to allow me to feel relaxed and happy until my candidacy exam is over. And the funny joke is when the candidacy exam is over, I didn't necessarily feel those things right away because that's not a circuit that I was reinforcing for the 2-3 months that I was preparing for my candidacy exam. So the conditions don't even work. And so building off of your own evidence is great because there's no conditions. It's believable because you're pulling it from your own life. And if you have, and this is the juicy part, if you have a statement that's showing up in multiple areas of life, it means that all of those areas are going to improve as you continue to build that circuit in your brain. And so now that you're armed with this nuance, I hope that you can begin to tinker with statements and affirmations so that everything that you're inviting into your life in terms of, the statements you're writing or the words you're speaking are helping you build the circuits that you desire. And of course, if you want any support in this, whether it's, finding a statement that's really going to have a good cross section of many areas of your life, or if it's, finding an affirmation that feels truly believable, please drop it in the comments below what you're working on. I'm happy to reply and provide you support or resources. You can also DM me on Instagram at Synaptic Sylvie. And if you liked the episode and got a lot out of this episode, please like, share, subscribe. That certainly helps me. And it also helps me figure out in terms of what's going to help you move forward, building your breast brain the best. And with that, I look forward to learning more with you on the next episode. Have a wonderful rest of your day.